All right, welcome back to Built to Ship, the show where we talk to the builders behind the AI transformation, founders, product leaders, and engineers who are actually shipping real AI products. Today I'm joined by Peter, co-founder of Promi and a fellow YC S24 alum. Good to see you, Peter.
Good.
Promi uses AI to personalize discounts for e-commerce brands, and we'll get into what that means in just a second. Welcome.
Yeah, good to be here.
Awesome. Well, yeah, let's set the scene. Just a quick background. What were you doing before Promi, and how did the idea first come together?
Yeah. So like a lot of the other kind of Y Combinator companies, I was been working in the pricing domain for quite some time. So right before Promi, I was a product manager at Uber, responsible for kind of leading the tech teams for discounting. So if you think about, and I'm sure a lot of people listening know the discounts that you'd get on your Uber app or your Uber Eats app on a weekly basis, that was our team. We were responsible for figuring out which discounts go to which people and really kind of trying to optimize and generate as much revenue as possible with that. And so surprise, surprise, I ended up taking that and building it into Promi. So it's very similar tech.
Amazing. And I imagine that that kind of tech was probably a cross-functional effort, right? Like, did you have what kind of like roles worked on that? Software engineers, ML engineers, AI.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It was very much a kind of quintessential big tech kind of tech pod that was working on this. So we had uh, a ton of engineers, both your kind of full stack machine learning engineers. It was very much a machine learning AI product that we worked on to personalize the discounts. Um, we also had a lot of data scientists, so PhDs who kind of come in and tell us, we should be thinking about this or that, or kind of how better to optimize these things. And then beyond that, there was a small team of product managers. We had kind of designers come in and out on a part-time basis. We were more so on the back end optimizing the types of discounts that we'd send versus like building out new discount experiences. But we did kind of dabble in it, get our feet wet and all of that, all the above.
Awesome.
So yeah, it
Very
was
cool. Yeah.
about everything.
Well, so I imagine like a lot of that background, like you said, is what you were able to bring to Promi. But beyond like that technical expertise, around this AI discounting, what was the core insight that said like, "Hey, I need to build this right now"?
Well, I think the biggest thing that stood out to me is just the magnitude of revenue lift that we were able to generate by personalizing discounts for people. Um, and a lot of people out there say, well, obviously you're generating revenue, you're giving out discounts. So if you're cutting the price, you're going to generate more revenue. But we tend to look at this very much on a what we call a cost neutral basis. So it's basically saying, hey, how much are you spending if, for instance, you gave a 20% discount to everyone, and then see, given that level of spend, how much revenue are you generating, and compare that to, okay, let's say you spent that same amount, but you gave some people, no discount, other people a 30% discount, some people, a 10%. And then how much revenue can you generate with that? And, really in a nutshell, and there's obviously a lot of nuances to this, but I think we, on average, generated something like a 30% lift in the amount of revenue
Wow,
that generated that
that's incredible.
yeah, that Uber had with those campaigns. And seeing that, it's pretty compelling to say like, hey, really everyone should be using this, or at least some version that doesn't have to be quite as sophisticated what Uber is doing today, because Uber has a ton of data and a team of 40 engineers working on this. But there are really simple things we can do to at least get 80% of the way there.
Amazing. Yeah, before Voker, I worked in e-commerce and data science and analytics at a company called Lowell, and I got to say, like, touching pricing is always a scary thing for owners, and I think the best way to do it is to kind of do this scenario planning and be data driven. So I love that you all are really taking like an experimental approach to how you do this. Maybe you want to share a little bit more about kind of how that works. How do you actually like test and measure? If there's anything you want to provide there.
Yeah, 100%. So everything that we do is an A/B test. Um, which is a little bit of a departure in what I think a lot of, at least the smaller e-commerce companies, are used to doing, because they just don't have the traffic to generate results from an A/B test, or they just don't have the sophistication on their teams to like really kind of pull it off the right way, whether that be an actual kind of randomization platform to kind of sort people into different groups, or really understand the kind of statistical significance of things. So that's actually something that we bring to a lot of the merchants that we work with too, is just like that level of sophistication. But when we're running these A/B tests, really what we're looking for, the hero metrics in e-commerce, and a lot of times are what we call ARPU, so average revenue per user. But then we're also looking at, in our case, a lot just gross profit per user as well. Depending on the merchant, sometimes it's available, sometimes that's not. But like those two things are kind of really the North Star. And if we're able to kind of improve both of those, and a lot of times we don't settle for just improving one, we want to kind of improve both, then, we're doing our job right. And I think we've come to expect that we can improve both, just because there's a lot of sloppy discount strategies out there. So
Amazing. Yeah, I think pricing is a really powerful lever. It's pretty scary to move, but when you have this data driven approach that I'm sure improves over time as onboard more and more data and learnings across your model, that's really meaningful impact. I want to
yeah,
hear a little bit about like your product itself, maybe just at a high level. Like, what does it include? Obviously, you're personalizing discounts and increasing ARPU and gross profit for merchants.
mhm,
Do you have like a platform? How does the onboarding process work? Anything you want to share about that? And I'll kind of put
yeah,
your website up on the screen as well as you talk through it.
yeah. So you got it right. We personalize discounts with AI. Compared to a lot of kind of the personalization tools out there today, we actually make price changes themselves. This isn't just emails that we're being a little bit smarter on sending out to people, or SMS messages or things like that. We found that by far the most impactful thing we can do is change the price. And so that's kind of where we go. And, that was a little bit of a hurdle in the fact that it surfaced and caused much more difficult integrations. It was a much more difficult like tech challenge to integrate at that point, but we think it was definitely worth it. Um, Today, we basically are able to kind of drop in a code snippet that will dynamically update the price depending on who it is who's coming to the website. And really, if you kind of want to get into the model a little bit more, kind of in a nutshell, what's happening is we're looking at things like, where is someone coming from, like AKA traffic source, what device are they using, time of day of week, geography that they're sessioning from. And then we're also actually able to look at, has this person sessioned before? What products have they looked at before? What kind of transactions have they had before? And kind of boil all that up into a prediction of price sensitivity. Um, a lot of people don't realize, just like I mentioned this before, that there's a huge potential for increasing revenue by personalizing. Even taking just one of those features that I just mentioned, traffic source, for instance, you have wildly different types of visitors and intent of those visitors coming from, for instance, Instagram ads versus someone who may be typing in the URL of the website directly to go there. If you're typing in the URL, you have a way higher intent to purchase than someone who clicked on an Instagram ad. And so we're able to actually exploit those types of things in order to adjust the discounts. And that's kind of, one example of how the model works. And then we have, dozens and dozens of other features to better optimize.
Amazing. That's a great insight that direct visitors are, higher intent, and we'll have to pass that back to our marketing team, see how we can instrument some signals around that. I also got to say, like, this is a very clean and crisp website. Like everything from the responsiveness to just the messaging and the imagery. Yeah, it's pretty clear. I think that probably resonates well with e-commerce brands. But yeah, pretty impressed, and definitely
Well,
going to
thank
send
you.
this back to our team as well.
It's like
Yeah.
version 3 or 4 of the website. So it did not start this clean. Like most things we build, we iterate over time and make it better.
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear more about that iteration process, especially when it comes to like AI. So you've already talked a little bit about like the machine learning and AI aspects of your platform. Um, AI is a pretty broad term, and right now a lot of people talk about Gen AI and LLMs, but there's still this whole space of use cases of what we might call traditional machine learning, right? And so I'm curious, like, what parts of your product are there any that use LLMs? Are they all using other forms of machine learning? Are you using LLMs just in your own workflows? Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're a little bit unique in the kind of broader landscape of why Combinator companies these days, in that one, we're fully building our own models. We're not actually relying on kind of any of the foundation models out there with like ChatGPT or things like that. But and then two, we're actually leveraging very much kind of the very like basic versions of machine learning. It's the bread and butter, feature stores, things like that. Where we've kind of started to inject a lot of the LLMs and kind of new innovations in AI is for better feature generation. So you can imagine things like, how are we able to, like, what characteristics should we kind of pull out and just like throw into this model for different people who are kind of coming into the website. And I think there's a lot more that we can do there. And realistically, how this helps is, it allows us to generate signal from less data than we would need before. So we're definitely tapping into a lot of those LLMs, but the foundation is actually really kind of bread and butter feature store kind of stuff.
I love that. I love that you say it's kind of like, I don't know exactly if you said boring or old, but it's just like traditional ML, which frankly can have a lot of ROI. And I think this happens with every like sort of tech wave. There's a lot of hype, and unfortunately, that masks over a lot of the value that exists, in any new technology. And so, I love that you all are kind of using like the right tool for the right job. And there's still creative ways where LLMs can play a part, but it doesn't mean like plug in an LM to do discounting or something like that. That's not exactly like what it's built for. So,
Yeah.
on that note, I'm curious what you think about sort of the AI in media and in the news and everything today. Like there's this general sense of AI is everywhere. There's some fatigue. I'm interested in building products that actually drive value for our customers. You're very clearly interested in that. You're measuring literally gross profit and ARPU. And so like picking out, you know, um, the signal from the noise can be kind of difficult right now. Do you find that as a challenge for selling your product? What do you think in general about, how people are slapping AI on top of everything?
Yeah. I guess there are kind of two competing thoughts, at least a little bit in my head. One, I do think it is a pretty saturated market in the fact that like everyone's trying to show how they're using AI in their features, and there are a million new kind of Shopify apps or B2B SaaS tools that leverage AI in some capacity, whether kind of actually using AI or kind of just markety speak, throwing it on their product. The flip side that's kind of competing in my mind is that what we found is a lot of merchants really, and our customers really want AI. And so I think from their perspective, they're probably looking for AI tools. It's just that they have to sort through so much kind of inbound on like different types of AI that they could potentially use. And really for us, it's like a lot of times we're able to book sales calls because merchants are interested in AI and the concept of optimizing their store. But then when we sit down with them, we need to make sure that we differentiate ourselves from like the millions of other options out there. And that can be even more difficult than, getting the sales call to start.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. When they say, I've seen a similar demand for AI in general, and people inbound asking about, yeah, how do I transform my business with AI? What is your experience of what they think AI is? Like, when they come to you because they want AI, do they bring all these random use cases, or are they pretty clear on like, no, I understand that you're for, personalizing pricing and discounting?
Yeah, it really depends on the merchant. I think there are plenty of merchants out there who kind of just think that it can do anything and are asking us to, run tests on generating copy or things like that. And I'm like, this is just not kind of really at all what we do. Um, but once we kind of sit down with them and have a couple conversations, I think they really kind of understand the limits of what we are, the scope of kind of what we built and what we're targeting and optimizing for. Um, Discounts in general are kind of there's a broad application of different types of discounts. So you can imagine there's probably on your given e-commerce merchant, there's like a sales section that's just kind of like automatic discounts that are applied when you like look at the price and things. And there's maybe a email sign up discount. And then if you sign up there, you get kind of an endless stream of emails and SMS messages that are like offering you new discounts all the time. And then there are kind of win back campaigns and like abandoned cart campaigns and all these types of things. And so even within the kind of realm of discounts, which realistically a lot of times, we think of as just like a form of pricing, we've kind of narrowed in and said, okay, we want to focus on these types of things because we think these will allow us to have the biggest impact.
I love that. Focus is super key in an early startup, and something that I constantly struggle with, because you have so many ideas and you kind of have the agency and autonomy to go build and try things, especially with, with LLMs. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it's good to keep that focus.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm curious to hear a bit about, you've talked about now how like AI is powering your product. What about like how you're actually building the product? Like there's a lot of schools of thought in terms of like using LLMs to code for you. There's all sorts of tools that continue to come out around it for prototyping. Do you use any of those types of tools internally? What are your thoughts there?
Yes. The answer is definitely. As much as possible, really. The way that myself and my co-founder see it is it's a bit of kind of a potentially a differentiator in the fact that like we can be faster than a lot of the other maybe large companies out there who haven't been quick to adopt these types of things. And being slow is not something that we can afford. So we need to be on the cutting edge of having all the advantages we can when shipping these types of things. And I think it's like one small way where we can actually have a little bit of an advantage. So, I mean, realistically, what that means is my co-founder, the CTO, is using AI products to write as much code as possible. I am using AI products to write as many queries as possible to do my data analysis on a daily basis.
Hmm.
I'm trying to automate as much of the admin work as possible, whether that be generating job offer letters, job descriptions, things like that, content for the website, anything like that. So very much kind of bought in on using AI where we can.
Are there any places where you feel like, hey, you're using it because you want to stay aware of like what the state is, but you're still not super happy with it, and you think, it'll get there, but let's say, I don't know, image generation or unit testing code or something. Is there any place that you'd love to see like more advancement, in these tools you're using?
Um, I mean, there probably is. I like my co-founder probably has a better perspective on like the coding side of things. Um, I'm probably less critical of AI than he is, in the fact that like
Hmm.
uh, there are plenty of times where it can't actually write. I don't know the query that I want to write, and maybe that's just because I haven't put in kind of like asked the right question, but or it's kind of missing some context or it hallucinates a little bit. Um, I think it's always worth asking the question to start because it's right 80% of the time or something, and so that's still worth the extra time to kind of type in and see if they can help you out.
Makes sense. Yeah. I'm kind of curious, selfishly, to hear your perspective as like a leader, not only a founder, but like someone who's led product, at places like Uber. Voker, our platform is meant for product engineering teams to build complex AI features and products, and help them kind of ship that quickly. Where do you think? So we ask like a lot of product managers these kind of questions. Where do you think like product managers will fit into development? As time goes on, right? It used to be kind of more like, hey, I'll set the scope, I'll talk to the customers, then I'll go hand something off to engineers, to build. Do you think that's kind of still the role? Do you see them playing more of a part in prototyping or developing features, and maybe same on the other side for engineers? Like, do you see them coming into the fold when it comes to like coming up with ideas or creating PRDs or something? Because now they can use systems to do that. Yeah, what are your thoughts there on like how product teams work?
And specifically how like AI is going to change how product teams work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, I think there's so much more narrative right now on like how it's changing the engineering role. The fact that it's like replacing a lot of like the junior engineers. Um, Product managers, I'm sure there's a lot of that job that also can be automated, but it probably depends a little bit on like the type of product manager. I've always thought that product is one of those roles that is very different depending on the company that you're in, um, versus, software engineer. Yeah, maybe the culture and such is very different, but like you have kind of similar deliverables at least. You're shipping code. Product managers, my first job as in product was at jet.com, was a startup, and it was very much more of the kind of sprint planning, cleaning up the Jira backlogs and such. And at Uber, I didn't touch any of that. That was all run by the engineering teams. It was very much more kind of just aligning between teams internally, um, building a business case to get more resources to apply to a product. I would write PRDs, but I don't even think that was the most important part of my job. So I'd say like the former case of product, I'd say probably a lot more can be automated with that. Managing your roadmap and just like kind of the project execution part of product management. I think that can be automated. You can probably get pretty far with writing a PRD template and then, filling in with just some context that, to kind of speed up that process. But I think there's probably, maybe that means that more product will drift towards that kind of latter half of what I mentioned before, where it's strategically aligning kind of between teams internally at these big tech companies, or building cases to add more resources to a project or things like that, and a little bit less of the kind of mundane stuff.
Makes sense. Thanks for that. Yeah, and last thing I wanted to ask is just like, you mentioned that today Promi's focused on, you know, personalizing discounts in a very specific space. But you mentioned that there's like other channels, SMS, marketing, other places that discounts happen. What's your like long-term vision for Promi? Do you see yourselves kind of going deeper in what you're doing today, expanding across those other channels, or still TBD?
Yeah, I think that we definitely strive to address as many of those discount use cases as possible. I think realistically, people should think about Promi as personalized pricing more so than personalized discounts.
Got it.
Because even though the personalization comes in the form of a discount, we just think that is like more kind of acceptable in today's day and age
Mm.
of making price adjustments. But where I think that we will evolve towards is, realistically, I think a lot of the codes out there and like emails and SMS messages with like 10%, 15% off, something like along those lines.
Mhm.
And these kind of like big stunt campaigns where you're like, oh, for this day only, get 20% off. I think that we could move much more towards just a kind of personalized, just for this person, you have this
Mm.
offer. And it's more of an evergreen versus kind of that bumpy style where it's like, everyone's getting like an email blast all the time, like, with this specific date, and then, no discounts for a while, and then big email blast and no discounts. Versus just kind of a consistent, this is the right person to contact right now. We're going to personalize the site for them. And so it's more consistent over time is a little bit of kind of how I see things.
Awesome. Well, where can people find or try Promi and follow what you're building?
Yeah, so promi.ai, that's our website. If you get in contact there, I will probably be the one reaching out to you to chat more. And that's probably the best place. We have our app listed on Shopify too, if you're interested in taking a look. And yeah, those are the best
Amazing.
places to get in touch.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on Built to Ship, Peter. Excited to see what you ship next, and always good chatting with you.
Yeah, always fun.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Tyler. See ya.
Bye.